what is so fascinating about this dog work that you guys are doing is you go back 30 years and you start having some technology that gives you the upper hand in one capacity. And then, you're talking about monitoring really, really low density populations of animals that might even be extinct in areas. And so you see these camera trap situations going on where biologists are out there dropping cameras every so many, a couple hundred yards or whatever, and trying to get actual pictures or video of these animals. Yep. And all this technology is coming in. And at the same time, this one constant is that a dog's nose is damn near all the technology you need to do this. Even when combined with these amazing advances we have in lab work and everything, you still go back to this dude out there in the woods that evolved over the last, several thousands and thousands of years. It's incredible. And all, like you mentioned something, you said something that comes up so often on this is we just need to figure out how to ask our dogs the right question, and they'll give us a near perfect answer.
Right. Yeah, they are. They're amazing. I laugh all the time because, we keep track of all the cool, amazing stuff people are using dogs for, and the cancer stuff is, cancer, and now it's, epilepsy and all sorts of other stuff. And you read all those articles that, because the press loves it, right? The press loves all these things. And all of them at the end, almost always it ends with somebody saying, and now we're going to try to build a gadget that does the same thing. And I just laugh and say, why do you want to do that? Because, it'll cost way more. It won't be nearly as flexible. It certainly won't work for a ball or kibble or whatever, and we're hung up on this idea that if it's tech, it's fancier or more reliable. But, the truth is they're just amazing at it. And, people often say that, well, how do they do that? How can they smell that? And, I always, you hear different numbers, but, we use something like, 12% of our brains for vision, right? And that's our primary sense. That's our world, right? That's what we see and think and all of that. Well, dogs, it may be as high as 60% of their brains for olfaction. And so, I'm sure fishermen who they just get a glimpse of a trout rolling, feet underwater, and they know, oh, that's a brown or it's a bull trout or whatever. And the olfactory equivalent of that is and they're way better. So it makes perfect sense. So we just had dogs go down to Patagonia, to Torres del Paine National Park, to work with Panthera, the cat conservation organization. And they were wanting to use, they want to monitor mountain lions, pumas, cougars, whatever, down there under a series of different treatments. So livestock guarding dogs, outreach and education, flattery, stuff like that. And they wanted to refine the methods for counting, and so they had drones, with front-looking infrared and all that stuff, and dogs down there at the same time. And I said we should have a bet with the maker of the drone company who can find more cats. And the joke was that we'd bet a big bottle of scotch or something like that. Well, the wind was so high and the temperatures were so cold that the drone never got off the ground. So, but the dogs were finding tons of scats. So, it's a great story because they're good at this. There's a reason we keep these guys next to us, and that's one of the really fun things is just to keep track of how it's all. What are the new ways that dogs can plug into conservation work? It's really fun.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is really fun, and it's fun to see. You mentioned a lot of Africa work and the rhino poaching and the ivory market. And what I was reading about that kind of in preparation for this, I noticed, I saw online, maybe it was on your guys' website, about how, we sit here and we think, okay, kind of like the Central Asian market is where a lot of this stuff goes, which is true. But you also, I think it was on your website, talked about Washington State being kind of a place where a lot of this stuff shows up. And I don't think a lot of people in this country would, I know I hadn't heard that, and I've paid attention to these issues pretty closely. Yeah. And so it's easy, once again, it's kind of easy to think, okay, well, this is an issue for Africa and Asia, and okay, we want rhinos to be around, but I always say when it comes to conservation, it's like, very, very easy to, yes, I'm on the side of conservation. I want elephants to survive and everything. But when it's like, hey, well, then why don't you bring out your checkbook and and help.
Right.
People are like, well, I don't love elephants that much. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of easy for us here to be disconnected from that. And I didn't realize there was sort of a gateway over there in the northwest corner of our country where a lot of this stuff was coming in.
Yeah, and a lot of stuff's going out too. So it's been fascinating to sort of scratch the surface at a lot of these things. So a lot of the numbers are contentious. Some people will say the U.S. is a high demand country, and some people will say, well, there is demand here, but it's not. The truth is, we really don't have a good handle on what's coming in or what's going out. One of the interesting things that we've found is, and in the last year, we started working with state wildlife management agencies, and there are 29 states that have dog programs, and 27 of them are really focused on just game species and game species violations. So ducks and geese and turkeys and whitetails and stuff like that. The classic. The guy's got them hidden in his trunk or under, in the bed of his truck or whatever, and is over his limit. But increasingly, North American, like turtles, for example, and species and bears, bear parts are being trafficked to Asia. And one of the interesting things is for USDA APHIS and Customs and Border Protection and the Fish and Wildlife Service only monitor things that are coming into this country and staying in this country. So you can take turtles and put them in a box and mail them to Asia, and nobody's going to inspect that box. They might on the other end in Asia, but not coming out of here. So the truth is, we don't know what's leaving this country, and so we've been working a lot with. We helped establish and launch the Conservation Canine Officers Association, and all the states who have programs are now joining, and we're going to start expanding all the things. And they're doing, the states that are doing it, like in Florida, they do really cool stuff. They've got dogs trained on saltwater. And they'll alert to saltwater because it's a very clever way to do it, right? Because anything that's in saltwater, it might be legal, but if it is legal, then it needs to be documented and permitted. And if it's not, then it's by definition illegal. So, and they're going to want to know what's going on here. So there's a lot of low hanging fruit. There's a lot of work to do, and a lot of stuff we just don't know about.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, you're dealing with the logistics of monitoring a black market. How do you pin that down? And
you plug one hole and it comes out another. It's
Yeah. And it makes me wonder. You mentioned the black bear thing and black bear parts, and I'm assuming you're talking about bear gallbladders, and that's been a big issue for a long time. And I think about stuff like that. Maybe this is part of the reason it's kind of easy to be dismissive about this, because we look at, I look at like ground up rhino horn and I go, you guys still think this is an aphrodisiac and you're going to pay a crazy amount of money? Like, are you nuts? And the bear gallbladder is the same thing. And hopefully, in addition to the efforts that are being put into conservation and monitoring this stuff, hopefully there's just an education level that keeps increasing where more and more people will go, this doesn't make sense. Like, we're killing this rhino for this stuff that we don't need. Like, maybe we can get Pfizer involved or somebody can make something of the equivalent, and we'll let this go. And you just hope that we eventually move worldwide in that direction of just more understanding that some of this stuff that, this is ancient BS that we know isn't true anymore. And even if it were true, even if it was like the best benefit possible for you in an aphrodisiac way or whatever, like, it's still not worth what's happening for you to get this.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the crazy weird things is we've seen a number of species. Rhino horn's a great example. Back when I started working in Africa, in the 90s, it was just aphrodisiac. Rhino horn was believed to be an aphrodisiac. That's it. But now in Vietnam in particular, it's believed to have all these medicinal qualities and to help you drink more and have a higher alcohol tolerance and increase blood pressure and all sorts of crazy things. It's the new snake oil, right? It's just, like back in the Old West. And there are all these crazy, ideas about what it can and can't do. And, one saving grace is that there's a lot of fake stuff out there, but there's also a lot of real. So it's hard. It's just a hard thing to get your head around. And as we've watched elephants, because we all love elephants, have been amazing in terms of galvanizing people and understanding about wildlife crime and the global wildlife trade and all of that. one of our fears is that is when the ivory trade ends, will people forget that there are hundreds of other species, live animals, birds, reptiles, parts, plants, wood. So many things are being trafficked, and we really need to get on top of that. And it's scary. It's scary just how much is there. And when you look at container shipments, and the percentage of containers that actually get inspected is very, very low.
Yep.
And in a lot of countries, wildlife is considered a trifling crime, right? So people, they might be looking for drugs or guns or, human trafficking. And the sad thing is that, the same people who are trafficking wildlife, they're trafficking guns and ammunition and maybe even people because they're interested in the money. They're not, we're going to be doing this for a very long time.
Yep. These issues are not simple.
No.
We had a fellow on here from Montana named John Norris, who was, maybe you've heard of him. He worked out in California and, worked on the drug cartel grow sites out in California on public land. And when you dig into that issue, and they were using Belgian Mals as apprehension dogs, and it's a great story. Yeah. And what it ties back to is, okay, well, not only border security, but what's happening when these people get in here? And okay, you say, oh, well, who cares if they're growing marijuana? But then you look at the poisons they're using and all the incidental kills, and that stuff's leaching into groundwater, and it's like. These issues get so much more complex, and it kind of goes back to, when you talk about elephants, it is easy to get people to rally around certain species. You look at the wolf issue in this country right now, it's easy to get people fired up about wolves, fired up about elephants, but some kind of weed in a non-native weed somewhere, not so much. Some insects, not so much. And, we can see this down in Florida right now. Because Florida is just the perfect environment for a lot of non-natives. And you look at the iguanas that are down there, and you look at some of the snakes that have come in and how it's affecting the nesting bird populations and some of the mammal populations and this stuff. And then you get into the water and you go, okay, the lionfish and the peacock bass, and you just got this kind of like weird petri dish of, you don't know what's going to grow out of this yet, but it's going to change drastically. And all of this stuff that you guys are working on, I look at it and I go, it feels like a task that's just so monumental. It's like, how do you even start? Like, I think it's like the way people look at, if you take somebody who's never run a mile in their life and you say, go run a marathon, what do they think? Like, I hate running. Yeah. I don't want to start, and I don't want to work through 1 mile, then a 5K, then a 10K, then a half marathon. Like, it feels like too much, but you got to do something.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And, there are certain things. I mean, one thing I love about, this work and this job is that, you never wake up and say, does it matter? Right. I worry about, am I as effective as I could be? Could we be more efficient? Could we have a bigger impact? Sure. You worry about those things, but never, does the work we're doing matter? And, I think about places like India. If tigers can survive in India, we can make this work. There's a population of brown bears within 50 miles of Rome, in Italy, one of the most domesticated places in the world. And large carnivores all large carnivores in Europe are increasing. So there are a lot of hopeful stories. And we've been involved with black-footed ferrets over the last few years. And that's a fabulous, great story, with a dog angle, right? Because it was the dog that brought it back to the house in Matizzi. And now we've got coming up around 30 populations of ferrets out there in the world. And so, they're, and it's not easy, to be sure. Plague is hammering, some of those, but, weathering a plague outbreak looks a lot easier when you've got 30 populations as when you got one or two or three. So, those hopeful things, and it's really fun. The dog angle is really fun because people get excited about it. You were mentioning the boats and resistance to inspections and all that. And we've got 3 dogs up in Alberta. Usually what would happen is when these visual inspections of a boat, it can take an hour to do a big boat, thoroughly. And then other people are sitting back there thinking, oh man, I'm stuck here. They're grumpy. They're not happy about it. And number one, the dogs are much, much faster. They'll do a big boat in 3 to 5 minutes. So the line moves more quickly. But people who would normally blow past those stations, they see the dogs and they're like, "Hey, can he search my boat?" And they get excited about it. So it's a nice little niche that gives to feel good and to get to do stuff like that. And it's funny because the a lot of people aren't really aware that dogs can or will do this kind of stuff. And bird dog people, we know, we've seen them do it, right? We've seen them. You walk up. I'm sure you've experienced that, where you come walking up and you say, there is no way there's going to be a pheasant in there. That you can't hide a bird in that. And as soon as you think you've walked past it or whatever, pop, it goes up, and you go, of course it was there. Of course he knows better than I do,